Only now is the Middle East beginning to realize the true cost of the one-week war. For the Jews, the victors, the initial reaction to the ending of the conflict was one of jubilation and one of thanksgiving, as nearly 200,000 Israelis made their way into the newly captured old city of Jerusalem to visit the shrines there. Richard Lindley witnessed the moment.
Tradition has it that the drops of dew that form by night on the ancient stones of the Wailing Wall are the tears of the children of Israel weeping over the destruction of the temple 1900 years ago. Today it's Yavut, the Jewish harvest festival, and the celebration too of the day on which Moses gave God's 10 commandments to the Jewish people. And the tears today are tears of joy, for these pilgrims are visiting the holy places in the old city for the first time in 19 years. In their minds are the words of the prophet Jeremiah. Thus saith the Lord, refrain thy voice from weeping and thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded, and thy children shall come again to their own border.
But as the people, many of whom had only a few days before been in violent battle with their Arab neighbors, as they prayed, the first estimates of the real cost of the war came dribbling in. 679 Israeli soldiers had been killed. 2,500 had been injured. Mingling with the prayers of thanksgiving came prayers of sorrow and of remembrance. The Arabs had not given their own estimate of dead in the week's fighting, but the Israelis said there must have been between 7,000 and 10,000 Egyptians killed in the fight for Sinai alone. To that figure would have to be added the dead of Jordan and Syria. The other cost of the war, the cost of the material destroyed. It can be seen more dramatically than anywhere else on the road to Suez. Egypt's desert forces, robbed of air support, had been picked off almost at will from the air and from the ground. Here, on the central axis of the Sinai advance, the rout had been completed with merciless precision. "800 tanks on either side had squared up for the Sinai battle, more than were used in the famous Battle of Alamein. Israel's equipment was largely British and American, Egypt's mainly Russian. Israel claimed up to 600 Egyptian tanks destroyed and 100 captured. That's apart from scores of trucks, armored vehicles and guns also wrecked. Israel put her own tank losses at 61. Egypt, already a desperately poor country, is reckoned to have had war losses around £700 million, about 7 times the Russian investment in the Aswan Dam. Their air losses alone were staggering. 400 Arab planes were wiped out in the first few hours of the war. 10,000 men died in the battle for Sinai, most of them Egyptians. Days after the ceasefire, more were reported still to be dying, trapped in the waterless desert miles from help. The luckier ones were the prisoners. Over 5,000 were caught by the sheer speed of the Israeli attack. The fight on the Jordan front affected civilians far more, their homes, their property, themselves. Jordan put her dead, military and civilian, at 15,000, with thousands more wounded. Many of the civilian victims, it's claimed, were suffering from napalm burns. This was the price of war in the holy city of Jerusalem. For some, the scars will be long to heal. For the Jordanians, the short-lived war is a bitter memory. King Hussein had rallied the Arab people to it at a press conference the day before the war.
The Arab nation is now as one, facing its responsibilities, fighting for its rights, ready to fight physically, with all its might, to defend those rights to the end.
Jordan, too, suffered defeat from the air as Israeli planes smashed airfields and lines of communication before the Jordanians had much chance to get their military machine going. Days after his assurance that the Arabs would beat Israel in a war, King Hussein made an emotional statement to another press conference, this time one called to admit defeat.
The losses were tremendous. But the fact is that we are proud that we fought honorably. We are proud of our men, proud of the fact that despite all the odds, we were able to stand as men, not only on the front, but at home. We hope that these sacrifices won't go in vain, that we will get the support of all just people in this world. And that in our Arab world, Jordan's days of glory may be forever remembered.
In Israel, the people can afford to be less bitter. Reporter John Edwards found that most civilians felt that now they had taught the Arabs a lesson, as they put it, there were chances of a lasting peace.
The Arabs are smart. They will exploit this opportunity also and get together with us now and sit down and talk really real peace, because we can have a very great future in this area. With our know-how and all that the Arabs can give us, I think we can have a complete new world in this whole area together with the Arabs.
Are you happy about the ceasefire?
Well, yes, of course. I'm happy by the results, but I'm not happy that we came to the moment of war. I mean...
What would you like to see happen now? Would you like to see all the land that's been gained kept by Israel?
No, I would like to see peace.
Do you think the war solved anything vis-a-vis the Arabs? Do you think it's made peace more probable here in this area?
Oh, I think there may be a chance for peace now with the Arabs, yes, of course.
Do you think that there's any chance now that the Arabs will accept Israel even after this war?
Yes, I think there will be a possibility to peace with Jordan and the other countries. So it's more, will be easier than before now.
Before the one-week war, there had been over 1 million Palestinian refugees, people displaced from their homes when Israel was founded in 1948. Now, with Israel occupying 4 times as much land as she had then, the problem has grown enormously. Take Jordan. There had been 300,000 refugees living in camps on the west bank of the Jordan. When Israel recently overran the area, these refugees and many others were displaced by the advancing armies. Those who could not flee in time are left wandering, poverty-stricken and hungry. The Al Hussein Bridge across the Jordan. The Israelis bombed it as they advanced to the river's edge. The refugees have to cross it to get to Amman or wherever there is shelter. And most of these Jordanians are refugees for the second time. They're the original Palestinian Arabs. At this point, they're still 40 miles from Amman. It's reckoned that well over 100,000 refugees have flocked there since the war. But the Palestinian refugees aren't really wanted anywhere. Although the Arab countries have sheltered them for nearly 20 years, most of them have had to stay in UN camps, bringing up their children with the forlorn hope of one day returning to Palestine. Until the war came, that is. Now, for the second time, many have had to move on. In 20 years, little was done to relieve the problem. Israel was always reluctant to take back the Palestinians displaced in 1948 for fear of being swamped by a hostile Arab element in the population. It was basically this problem that caused friction between Jews and Arabs. Now the refugee problem is greater than ever, and Israel is once again showing reluctance to let the new refugees return, because apparently of the fear of sabotage. John Edwards asked the leader of one party, a Jordanian policeman, about their flight from Jerusalem.
Did many people keep going on to Amman, onto the east? Many crossed the river?
Many crossed the river, many of them. About 40,000.
Most of them were killed.
Most of them. And many of them died after all.
Died by who killed them?
By the sun and by the airplanes. And they are traveling between the army cars, and when the bombs stopped in the army cars, the civilian cars damaged and turned and such things, many accidents.
Are these people frightened now of living under Israel, under the Jews?
They are not frightened. Even that they shall die, they will live in their houses. They are happy to live anywhere in peace.
Yes, all right.
Everything that they need, peace, everywhere. Nothing except peace.
At one camp near Jericho, thousands of Palestinian refugees lived in relative peace before the Israeli capture of the city. Then most of them fled, and the camp is now almost deserted. No one can predict whether they'll return. It may be to an uncertain life under the Jews, but there is shelter here at least. Their only certainty is that whether the refugees like it or not, they'll be used as political pawns in any negotiations between Israel and the Arabs.
Are there any people here who thought that the war would get them back to Israel? Did they think that if they won the war, the Arabs, they could go back to home?
The people, the Palestinian people, they preferred his home, not to sell it and not to keep it.
But did they think that if King Hussein won the war here, they would go home?
People?
Yes.
I don't know.
Do they mind living under Israel now? Would they mind if Israel took over?
No, they're not mind. They're not mind.
They don't mind.
They are happy, but they still the people still worry, because they never been tried the Jewish life, Israel life, you know. They don't know.
Is this a good life here? Are they happy in this
camp? Yes, they're happy, yes. My father, when we come from Palestine, to here.
In 1948?
1948. After we asked our father about our life before, he said, we have good land there and good life, and we're friendly with the Jewish people. We have Jewish live near us, and he said, I have many friends there.
Any Jewish friends?
Yes, and Jewish friend. And he talk about the life. He happy.
And who do you think, what went wrong then? Why did you start fighting Arabs?
Well, we don't know. We don't know about it. We don't know who asked for trouble. But we We like the life before.
If the Israel government said to the refugees, you can come back and live in Haifa, live in Tel Aviv,
Yeah.
would the refugees go?
Yes, the refugees, they're gone. All the people say me, I live in Ajur. If they said to me, go back home, I go back home.
But you can't at the moment, do they?
Yeah, but of course we can't in the moment. We like to try first. If the Jews not make any trouble with the people or with the, I mean anything, the people, they like that.
Now, do the Jordanians like refugees?
Well, not all of them, not much, not same as Palestinian people. Palestinian people, we like each other good, but not same as Jordan to Palestine.
Countries don't, and no country likes refugees?
Yeah, well, of course they don't like them. They like back home. They like them back home.
Jericho. If Israel decides to hold on to it, she'll have to take its people too. This is part of her great problem. In the newly occupied territory, she now has 900,000 Arabs to feed. Alan Hart reports from Tel Aviv.
It seems clear that much though Israel wants a permanent peace with the Arab world, she wants it only on her own terms. At this moment in time, Israel seems to feel that she holds all the cards. And the aces, as far as Israel is concerned, are the territorial conquests she has made. But now that the conquests have been made, for how long does Israel intend to hold on to them? The clear implication in all of the official statements that have been made by Israeli ministers since the end of the war is that Israel intends to use the captured territory as bargaining power. In other words, it seems that Israel will not give up any of the captured land unless, in exchange for it, the Arabs are prepared to recognize Israel's right to exist. Well, the man who'll be in charge of the bargaining for Israel is Foreign Minister Abba Eban. I talked to him about Israel's intentions. Mr. Eban, government statements since the war seem so far to have been so general as to be almost ambiguous, but the implication in them is that Israel doesn't intend to give up any of the territorial conquests she's made until the Arab world recognizes Israel's right to exist. Is this broadly Israel's position now?
I think there's a very good reason for keeping our statements very general in their form. We will enter a detailed discussion of our ideas and of our proposals when we sit round a table with the Arab states. We're not negotiating with the United States or the United Kingdom or the other countries of the world. We have no conflict with them. And therefore our specific proposals and our specific positions ought to be defined when we meet the Arab states.
You say quite glibly, Minister, when peace talks get started. Aren't you being unduly optimistic?
Well, so many revolutionary things have happened recently in the Middle East that we ought to start thinking in rather unconventional terms. After all, there is a situation which the Arab states created. A pattern of stability existed for 10 years. It could have existed, as far as we were concerned, for a further period of years. It was shattered to smithereens, firstly by Nasser, who openly said that he was no longer prepared to accept the 1957 to 1967 situation. More surprisingly, it was thereafter disrupted by Jordan. Now, a new situation has arisen. I have no doubt at all that the Arab states want to change that situation. Well, if they want to change it, why should we be sure that they will not come to the address at which such changes can be fruitfully discussed?
But how can you be so optimistic when within the last 48 hours President Nasser has said in the most strong terms he will have nothing to do with talks with Israel?
You know, some things that President Nasser has predicted and proclaimed have not come to pass. He said that he would maintain a blockade in the Gulf of Aqaba, but the other day Israeli ships passed through the Gulf and the Straits. He said that he would destroy the state of Israel. Well, we're not all that destroyed at the moment. He said that the hour had come to liquidate Israel. We don't look as though we're very much liquidated. He said that the united Arab world would bring about Israel's annihilation. Now these things have not come to pass, and therefore if he says that he will never sit down with Israel, one should look at that prediction in the light of other of his predictions which have not come to pass.
If the Arabs don't recognize Israel's right to exist, in other words, if there is no peace settlement, can you now state that Israeli troops will remain on the frontline positions in Egypt, in Syria and in Jordan, where they now are forever?
Well, I have a general principle about not answering questions that begin with if, because I am still living in the hope that the Arab states will appraise the situation realistically and will understand that they cannot change existing situations except in some kind of dialogue and discourse with the nation whose consent is necessary.